Okay, so wake up. Welcome to the next class. We're in the middle of chapter 2, L'chaim. I already made the bracha, just in case anyone. Okay, so we are going to start off the class just rehashing what we said last week, because it was a very, very deep, heavy concept. And then we'll continue. So one of the questions we posed is, here was to review the descent, the chain-like, it's called in Hebrew, the Seder Ishtalshalut, this chain-like order of descent. How do you get from godliness, to the world of action? So we said first is God, and then from godliness there was a tzimtzum, contraction, and then when godliness begins to take shape, so for example you have light, and then in order to appreciate the different colors of the rainbow, you have to refract that light. The colors are always there, just you can't appreciate it. So similarly, in godliness, in God's or is light, all those different chachma, bina, das, conception, contemplation, compassion, loving kindness, serenity, bonding, all that is there. We just can't. It can't be separated. It can't be appreciated. The first time it can be appreciated is in the world of Atzilus. It can be experienced separately as chachma, which is conception, and bina, contemplation, das, application, and chesed, loving kindness, and gevura is discipline, tiferes is compassion. It's in the world of Atzilus. But in the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, the reason why it's called the world of emanation is because he's emanating toward himself. He's expressing himself towards himself. He's thinking to himself. So Atzilut is the world of absolute godliness. In that world, the possibility of creation of something independent, something separate from God, the possibility doesn't even exist. In between Atzilut and Bria, there's what's called the Pargud. There's the separation. That's where Yesh Ma'ayin happens. That's where something from nothing happens. Not because there's a Yesh, a created being, material being yet, but the possibility of a material being identifies itself as independent of God. That's where we begin. Now, all the neshamot, to get back into, we can go off on that for a long time. All the neshamot come from God Himself. That's at the beginning of chapter 2. It says. So how do you get from here? Because it goes through a whole filtration process. So most of the neshamot, they begin to go from up there into a body, starting in the world of Bria. Because in the world of Atzilut, there is no expression of soul. The first expression of soul as an independent creature begins in the world of Bria, the world of creation. Remember from last week, it's called the world of creation because that's where the idea of creation begins. And then it goes down and down. So some neshamot, like Moshe Rabbeinu, don't go through the whole chain-like order of descent. It goes just express train. So because it doesn't go through the whole trip, it doesn't get as fatigued. The neshama doesn't get as fatigued. Now when you're fatigued, you don't feel like yourself. So too, the neshama is fatigued, it's covered over by the experience, it doesn't feel godliness. Other souls can come from a very high source, but they went through a whole trip, a whole chain-like order of descent, and therefore they don't feel its source. Interesting.
This came from Atzilut straight to Asiya?
Bria to Asiya Gashmi.
Yeah?
Bria, yeah.
From Bria to... He skipped over Yetzirah.
Everything. No, he skipped the whole Bria too. He came from Chesed of Bria.
Okay.
Now, just interesting, if you remember last week, I gave the example of a guy's writing a play. Interesting, just by divine coincidence, a guy was in my office and he's saying he works in media, and he wrote a book, and he's trying to get his book not published but made into a show or TV. I don't know what the word is. Produced. There you go. He says the first thing he tells me you have to do is you have to summarize this whole 600-page book into one page, into a single 2 paragraphs. That's the first thing. And then if they like it, then you have to give them the Bible, which has all the different details of how many episodes and what it's going to be. And then they decide to produce it. I said, this is on Monday. I said, this is exactly what we're talking about. First, you have the world of Bria, which is 1 paragraph. And if I take that guy's page, I'll never create the idea he had in his head, because it's all 600-page book is in 1 page, right? Then after that, the world of formation, where he give it all the details, what's going on, how many episodes, that will end up exactly like it happened in his mind, maybe, probably close. But not until he actually does something can I mislabel it, right? I can take the book, tear off the cover, and put written by Mordechai Druzia, right? And someone might not know the difference because the author seems to be disconnected. So the further away you get from the source, the less aware we are of the manufacturer of the source. That's what the world of Asiya is, the world of action. Because action, and we're going to speak about this more in chapter 4, action is the most external part of us. There's thought, speech, and action. Okay, but we're jumping ahead. Here we go. Everyone ready?
Ask a question?
No. I'm kidding, yeah.
So you're giving this example. The further you are from the source, the more different it is from what it was.
The further you are from the source, I said, was the harder it is to recognize the source.
The Torah was given to Bnei Israel in Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
It's been a while since that source.
That's why. So what you're saying is that's why the rabbis of the previous generation are more of an halachic authority than today's generation. So in halacha, the rule is authority goes based on time period. So the rabbis of the Mishnah, that's 400 years, let's say, that's a time period. They can't argue with
200 years.
No. So the Tanaim start with Hillel and
Mishnah
Shammai.
and the Gemara, that's like a 500 year span.
No.
The Mishnah is about 300 years.
More.
The Gemara is about 200.
The Mishnah was written 200 years after the destruction, but the Tanaim start like 200 years before. It's a 400 years, 150 years. Yeah. It's 400 years of the Mishnah. The Gemara is 400 years because it was written by Ravina Ravashi in the 500s. I have a very interesting book here. It's a timeline book.
Like historically, they define each period by
Be careful,
500
be careful
years.
there.
500 year period of the second temple, 500 year period of the first temple, and then the 500 year period of the Talmud, which is split into two parts: the Mishnah and the Gemara. And the Gemara is smaller, but
I'm saying I can show you the timeline, which you'll see.
I'm just pointing out the historian's explanation of the timeline of the Jewish timeline.
That's incorrect because some of the rabbis from the Mishnah, they lived at the end, towards the second half of the second temple. Okay, so let's say after the story of Hanukkah, and they also lived after the destruction. So Rabbi Yehuda Anasi authored the Mishnah, lived way after the destruction of the second
500
temple.
BC to 0 is regarded as the second temple period.
Okay, but that's not necessarily.
500 is the Talmud period.
That's wrong.
And then Rishonim, Achronim.
Okay, so no, it goes Gaonim, goes Rabbani Suvarai, then Gaonim, then Rishonim. Rishonim is not till the year 1000.
Right.
Around.
Right.
I understand you want to round it off to 500, but it's not.
That's how historians do.
Yeah, but it's not exactly correct. Anyway, so the rule is So the rule is, you cannot argue with the rabbis of one period cannot argue with the rabbis from a previous generation because they were closer to the source, they had more clarity, and therefore we can argue. So the rabbis of the Gemara, the Talmud, are not allowed to argue with the rabbis of the Mishnah. They try to understand them. Now, if two rabbis of the Mishnah are having an argument, they can side with. Let's say if we side that the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai argue all the time. So you can have an opinion you agree with. So you're not necessarily arguing with the school of Shammai. You're agreeing with the school of Hillel. But you can't go say, Hillel says this, but I disagree. You have no authority to do that. But what I was saying is a little bit different. What I was saying is the further away you get from the source, the less aware you are of the source.
Aware?
Aware of the source. So and that's what's happening. The soul descends and descends. The more it descends, the less aware it becomes of its source. Not because it's any less holy, it's just less aware. And the more aware you are of your godly source, the easier it is for you to do a mitzvah. So Moshe was very aware. He was absolutely in tune, in sync with godliness. So to him, he couldn't understand why people didn't do what they're supposed to. Like we're going to see later in the Tanya. The Tanya said one of the questions that the Alter Rebbe asks on Moshe Rabbeinu. He said the Gemara asks this question actually. Moshe says, "What does God want from you already? Just listen to whatever He says and fear Him." Thank you, Moshe, for you. What's the big deal? Like it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson. What's the big deal? Why can't you understand astronomy? Because I'm not you, right? You ever see that video? It was a video that they once did to explain the teacher. It's an old video. Once did to teachers to help them try to understand how dyslexia works. So they made all the teachers sit in regular chairs, and they went on the board and said, "Was it A, or B?" And says, "What did he say that was? B? What, are you stupid? You can't see it's a D." I see a B, but it's not a B. Why can't you just see B? And try to. But that's the way they see it, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu, he sees clear because he, like as I've said, his neshama didn't go through any transitional watering down. He was aware of his source always. For regular Jews, it's a little bit harder. Anyway, let's go. So continuing after the whole introduction, let's continue with the Alter Rebbe's words. Like I said, I'm on the old print, bottom of page 58. You get bottom of page 60. It looks like the layout's very the same. After the introduction, turn the page. Here, right here. Yeah, after this introduction. Yep. We're turning to the Alter Rebbe's words. By the soul's descent, from one level to the next level, through the chain-like order. Ishtalshalut is not translated here. Ishtalshalut, it comes from the Hebrew word shalshelet, which means chain. Through the chain-like order, one level leads into another. Atzilos, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. Mechachmas Yisbarach, it all came from God's wisdom. If you remember, in the previous class, we said that Hashem's chachma, Hashem's wisdom and Him are one. Unlike us, the Maimonides said, remember, us, we have different faculties. We have a process of learning, our ability to store information, and the knowledge. Hashem is all one. So us and our wisdom are not one. They're very close to us, but they're not one. Right? You're always learning things every day because the information is not one with you. You're learning. That's why you forget information. But Hashem, when you say Hashem's wisdom, that's one with Him. So it comes from there, Kediksiv, like it's written. Kula mechachmas. He said, you made everything with chachma. Everything comes from Hashem's chachma. In fact, in the next section of Tanya, God willing, we'll get there. It's going to take us a while by the speed we're going. But it says, by Hashem, His chachma, His wisdom is action. By us, we think about it and then we do it. But Hashem, there is no process. It's just bam. So from that Hashem's wisdom, it was created the nefesh, ruach, neshama, and remember we said that in Tanya we're only discussing the three lower levels of the soul. The soul's expression is divided into 5 levels. This was 2 classes ago. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Life force, spirit, soul, life and unity. The higher 2 levels, chaya and yechida. We're not discussing because only tzaddikim really can tap into that energy. It's very difficult because to be in a state where the soul is alive and you feel the waste of the body, that the fact that the body is a lump of lifeless clay. That's a very high level. We're talking about nefesh, ruach, and neshama. That's why it doesn't. Many times in these terms, the book doesn't translate it because certain things you lose in translation. We learned this today and stuff, right? They went into the ignorant and the least worthy. Now, ignorant, again, we discussed a different time. Ignorant doesn't necessarily mean low worth. Ignorant means they never got a chance. Least worthy means their soul doesn't appreciate the source. They didn't even know their value. Their souls were more strongly affected. That's a very, very important word over there in small print. The souls were more strongly affected by their descent, and therefore they are not lowest level. Similarly, all the various levels of higher and lower souls are determined by the soul's descent. 2 people can go on the same plane. One's on first class, one's in economy class. They had a totally different ride. Moshe Rabbeinu flew first class. Alter Rebbe now goes on to relate a second point in our analogy to our case. Just as an analogy, the nails of the child are still bound up with their first source, which is the mind of the father, so too the case of the soul. The im kol zeh, although the soul goes through a whole long process, So you might say the soul changes. It's not true. It's true. It's not aware of its source. It's true. It's fatigued. But this is very strong words. Aidenu kashurais. The soul is still bound. And united. Biyichud nifla v'atzum, with a mighty and wonderful tie. With its original source. So when you go, you travel from here to LA. You're not in Miami. You're not in LA, and you're tired. Right? That one sort of comedian says you fly from Melbourne to LA. You flew for 13 hours. You come back. It's the same day, the same time. Like, did I fly somewhere? It's interesting. If you fly, by the way, let's say you fly Sunday morning. In the prayer, there's a song of the day for every day. And when you prayed in Melbourne, you said, Yom Rishon. This is the prayer for today, Sunday. And I'm back in LA, Sunday morning. What do you say? You gotta say, Hey, Yom Rishon. Even though you were on a plane for 13 hours, you gotta say, today's Sunday. And when you go there, you miss a day.
Wait, you would pray again?
Yeah, you have to pray again. Yeah. Well, actually, the reason why you pray again is because you do experience darkness.
Interesting.
It's not daylight. You do experience a little bit of darkness. Yeah. So if you didn't experience any darkness, then not. Yeah, but it's a crazy.
Nice anecdote.
It's a good one. So the neshama goes through and you think it's departed from one, it's arrived in another place, it's disconnected. The Alter says no, that is not true. The neshama, even though you look at a Jew, you say this guy is a bum, he's a lowly person. The neshama is still tied into its original source. Now our job, by the way, is to help another Jew realize they're still connected. That's our job. See a Jew and he doesn't appreciate even who he is. Our job is to help that Jew realize that he's still connected, even though he hasn't learned, even though he doesn't know, and he doesn't read, and he hasn't done, and he has. A couple weeks ago, a guy came in, I asked him to put on tefillin. He said, I can't. Why? He has a tattoo. So you show me where it says in Shulchan Aruch that a person with a tattoo can't put on tefillin. Doesn't say it. Just because a person didn't eat what he's supposed to, didn't A, B, C, you know who's perfect? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is perfect. That's why next week's parsha, when he hits the rock, we have a whole question. Oh, how come Moshe didn't listen to God?
He did.
I'm saying, but the question, right? The whole thing, if anyone around here hits a rock, no one's writing a book about it.
God told him to go talk to the rock with his stick.
Exactly. Sometimes I tell my kids, I'm gonna come talk to you with my belt, right? I learned from Moses, right? Gosh forbid. I'm kidding, by the way.
You're gonna start bringing that editing.
Exactly. I remember one time I was in arts and crafts store, and they had like this wooden something on the wall, like you can decorate. And it looked like a paddle from the olden times. So I told my wife, I'm gonna buy it. I said, why? We don't hit the kids. I'm gonna hang it on the wall. I said, why? Because anytime the kids misbehave, I'm gonna point. Not gonna use it.
It only works if you use it one time.
Yeah, you keep pointing, they're going to use it on you.
Exactly.
When we first moved to America, my aunt, in the middle of Publix, was frustrated by her son going crazy.
Yeah.
So she goes, Ariel, die!
Oi. Die is Hebrew for enough. Oh boy. Yeah, exactly. Talk about lost in translation. Oh my God, did you hear?
Everyone looked
Yeah.
at her.
Yeah. Lesson is don't bring your kids to the store. Or if you say that.
It's basically Ariel, stop.
Yeah. So he says, because that neshama comes from supernal wisdom. Because the nurture of the soul, the levels of the soul, nefesh ruach neshama, shalami aretz, of the ignorant, who menefesh ruach neshama shal tzadikim. Now here, by the way, the Alter Rebbe, and this ties in perfectly, because this Thursday is Gimel Tammuz, the yard side of the Babich Rebbe, and it's okay, he was a great guy, but why do we care so much about that he's a great man? What is the role of a tzaddik, the role of a righteous man? What's Moshe Rabbeinu's job? What's a Rebbe's job? He said every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, but in 2 weeks.
The whole of the tzimtzum happened because God, like, he giggled, and out of the thought of the tzaddikim. And
So I think what you're referring to is God wasn't sure to create the world, not to create the world, but he saw the souls of the tzaddikim.
he's like, it made him laugh, and
He got
that,
pleasure.
Like,
It is
that
actually-
laugh was
there's-
what created it. I don't know. It's like
So there's an interesting piece of Gemara which maybe you might be referring to, an Apicurus, and a heretic, depending on which side of the tracks you're from.
That's a Fritz and Epicurus.
So came to Rabbi Shua ben Levi and asked him a question. He says, "You believe that God knows everything?" He says, "Yeah." We have in the Torah, it says God regretted, or the word's not regretted. I'm trying to think of Vayinochem Hashem. I'm trying to think of the word. We're going to have it in Shmuel chapter 14 very soon.
Spoiler alert.
It's not regret, but he took back, right? When Hashem, like after created.
Rescinded?
Nechamaz. I'm trying to look for a good English translation. Anyway, so after he created man, and man became so corrupt. So he says, "Oh, see, if Hashem knows everything, how can he?" So Rabbi Shua ben Levi answered him, says, "You have kids?" He said, "Yeah." "When your son was born, you were happy?" He said, "Yeah." "You do know that one day your son's going to die, right?" "So why are you happy?" So he answered him, "Because time to be happy, you're happy. When time you're sad, you're sad." Same thing is, I think Hashem didn't know what's going to happen, but he saw that the good is going to come out. He celebrated the good. He saw the souls of the tzaddik. But that wasn't exactly what I was referring to. The job. What's the job of your head? The job of your head is to nourish your body. That's the job of your head. The tzaddikim, the tzaddikim, the righteous of the generation are called the Roshei, the heads of the generation. Now, this doesn't mean they're heads because they're great guys, and their job is to lead people to make sure they don't kill each other, to lead by example. That's a very exterior. That's the job. So if not for this great rabbi, you'd go and hack someone's hand off. I mean, that's not what we look at it. So if you remember from the example we gave last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember, that it's readily understandable that the brain of the child is connected to the brain of the father. Where does the child's toenails get a nourishment? From the child's brain. So the child's toenails are connected to the brain of the father because of the brain of the child, right? So you have these guys who are ignorant, don't do any Torah, don't do anything they're supposed to. Where is their connection? Where's their nourishment from godliness coming from? The job of the tzaddik is to nourish not only the Jewish people but the entire world. It says that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, author the Zohar, it says when he was alive, there was never a rainbow. What's the rainbow? It's interesting. The rainbow.
To remind us that God's going to hold back His wrath.
Right. So it's interesting. Rainbow became a signal of love and peace and beauty and everything else. But God has a wicked sense of humor, right? But it's a beautiful thing. But really,
It's a warning signal.
it's a warning signal. Right? Maybe like someone throws up maybe that's what the people in the Titanic capsule, they throw up a flare. I imagine someone saying, "Oh well, look at the beautiful fireworks." It's not. Let's hope they.
Yeah, right, for sinking.
All right. Let's hope they're found.
It's so interesting that you say that they're connected to the father, while the baby doesn't come from the father. Really.
It does.
Also
Were you not here during that class? You skipped that class?
Last week.
I don't know. When did we discuss it?
Yeah, you said that
It was
the
last-
baby
last-
has a connection with the mother because it's in the mother's body, but the
Well,
connection to the father.
that connection is readily understandable. It's a connection because the child is the summary. The child is made up of egg and sperm,
Yes.
right? So although the father is seemingly very disconnected, but in the manufacturing and the giving over, the father's entire essence is involved in the process. So although it's true true, the egg goes through a whole metamorphosis and is totally separate from the father, but the baby is still connected to the father because it came from the father's innermost essence.
All the way to the top.
All the way to the top, yeah. Because that's why, according to Kabbalah, there's one thing in life you can't multitask. It totally consumes you. That's the act of procreation. And that's why.
You've obviously not done high level math to prevent.
I don't know what math.
I'm just. If you do enough mathematics in the act of, it helps you. I'm just suggestions.
You gotta carry the one, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Everything you're distracted from the moment.
Or carry the
Exactly. Whatever can distract you from the moment. I personally prefer calculations. whatever
Since
requires three
I
or four numbers.
I don't understand what's going on, but because we're in the show,
It's a Tinder thing.
it's a Tinder thing. There you go. Right, better left unsaid. Anyway, so just like the child's nails are connected to the father's brain via the children's brain, so too, all the Jewish people are connected to the Eibishter. The job of the tzaddik is to give vitality, not meaning, obviously every Jew is connected, but the chayas, the vitality, the excitement for Torah and for Judaism comes because of the tzaddik. And I'm going to tell you a wild story. Listen close to the story. There was an accident, and there was a tragedy. A bunch of Jews died. I can't remember the circumstances. The guy.
Holocaust?
No. It was something. After. It was something to do with something with Israeli. Something Israeli Jews. I forgot what it was. It was a plane. Something. I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
And the guy came to the Rebbe. It was an Israeli diplomat. And the Rebbe said, I think it was like 60 people died, or 63, whatever the number was. And the guy said, no, it was actually like 59, not 60. And the Rebbe said, no, 60. So what happened was, there was a guy who was involved in the accident, was in a coma, then died. So that, I don't know why it happened. The guy went back into the Rebbe later on. I said, the guy's laying in a hospital bed in Israel. Like, how do you know? So Rebbe said, every soul that comes in and out of this world passes through this office. A tzaddik is not just a holy person. So there's two things. There's a tzaddik, a righteous person, and then there's the leader of the Jewish people. The leader of the Jewish people, like for example, Moshe and Aaron, right? Aaron was a very holy person, but Moshe was the leader. The job of the leader, just like your brain, is to make sure every part of your body is well maintained. And this is what we see in this week's parsha. This week's parsha is Korach. A bunch of guys rebel against Moshe. Now Moshe could have said, you know something, the hell were you? Die screaming and enjoy. Moshe goes and tries to make peace. He goes to Dasan and Aviram. Dasan and Aviram were Moshe's biggest antagonist. And every story has, right? These two guys, always two brothers, always gave Moshe a problem. And for no reason, by the way. Moshe didn't. Right. And Moshe goes, because the job of the Nasi is to relate. Is to relate to every single Jew. So if you stub your toe, where do you feel pain? You don't feel it in your toe. You feel the pain in your head.
I was going to say in the person who you're aiming at.
Right. So that's what it is. So he's saying that the chayas, the vitality of every single Jew, even the Jews that are ignorant, they come from the heads of the generation. Rashi b'nei Yisrael shebedoidam. V'zeh yuvanim. This will understand. My Maimer Rabbi Hussein Zal, with the comment of the sages on the verse, it says al pasuk. It says in Devarim that our job is to love Hashem, lo dafka boy, and to cleave to Him. Gemara asks, how do you cleave to God? What are you cleaving to? What are you attaching to? I know, especially in another place it says that Hashem is eish eichlahu. Hashem is a consuming fire. So the Gemara asks the question. This is the Gemara in Ksubas. What does it mean? So the Gemara answers, Shakol Davak, whoever cleaves, whoever it is attached to to a Torah scholar, my love, it becomes attached to the Shekhinah. Now, I just want to clarify. This doesn't mean that you sit back and do nothing, and you're good because you're connected to the tzaddik and no part. That we don't believe in intermediaries over here. The job of the tzaddik is to bring out your best Judaism. Because many times, I'll tell you another story. There was a guy, he was depressed. He was very depressed, going through severe depression. And he went to the Rebbe, and he was talking about how he wanted to hurt himself. Well, and he was telling the Rebbe how he was a loser, and he can't this. The Rebbe says, you know what your problem is? You don't even know who you are. You don't even know your own self. So another story. There's a shliach in Rebbe's emissary, I forgot which city it was, and he felt he wasn't doing well. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. He says, I'm giving up. I can't do it. Send someone else. So the Rebbe says, I was anticipating this, and I sent someone to help you. You should go check him out. And he said that guy's name, because he says if you don't recognize him, you should get to know him. What was he talking about? The Rebbe was saying you should get to know yourself. So many times, the reason why people would go to the Rebbe.
Who did he send?
No, the Rebbe was telling him to talk to himself, not to him, to the shliach himself, the rabbi himself. Many times, the reason why you go to a tzaddik is we don't even know what we're capable of. We sell ourselves short. That many times we don't do a mitzvah because what is our mitzvah worth? The idea of the tzaddik is to bring out the power we have inside of us, and as a yid. Continuing, through attachment to the scholars, the ignorant are bound up. They're bound up with the original lessons and the root and supernal wisdom. I'm continuing. If anyone has a question, by the way, please ask. I'm going to continue going until, unless you guys, interrupt me with a question.
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Exactly, right. Could you start from the beginning, right? So, and repeating and being attached to Hashem's wisdom means something. Hashem and His wisdom are one, like we quoted the Rambam earlier. Now in the parentheses, Al Rebbe is going to answer a side question, and Al Rebbe has a very powerful question there. So if a Jew, even an ignorant Jew or a sinner, goes to the tzaddik and says, "Help me," fine. What about the Jews who are against, who make Jews problems? Self-hating Jews.
What about Jews that
Hollywood, you mean?
No, what about Jews that have nothing to do with Judaism?
Doesn't make a difference. That's
No,
not.
I'm talking about like they've gone about marrying non-Jews, having non-Jewish
Doesn't make a
families,
difference.
celebrating non-Jewish
Doesn't make a
holidays,
difference.
not relating to Judaism in any way, not
Doesn't make a
really
difference.
want to associate. And now I give you that person who's hostile to your approach.
But no, there's two. You said two different things.
No, he's hostile.
Okay, but by the way,
There's only one version. I just didn't get.
I know.
The key then is the hostility.
By the way, sometimes a person could have grown up religious and be hostile also. He doesn't necessarily
What
have to be
about
into,
the hostile Jew person that's born Jewish?
Yeah, or a guy.
How do you? Yeah.
Really hostile to Judaism or hostile because they're teenagers? How old is this?
No.
I'll pull quotes up from.
No. We're not talking about teenagers being obnoxious.
Judaism is a
We're talking about.
There's all of this is nonsense.
I mean,
how do you approach that?
There are stories of
Tanya?
Jews. There were stories.
Tanya, the Yechida? You
No.
need to learn about.
No,
your-
there was.
So in a way, you are talking about my kids.
Oh, well, in a way,
This is why I'm saying.
in a way, I think that
Right,
American Jewry is more familiar with this character than pretty much any other
No.
But
culture.
No,
he wants to
I
put
think-
himself as an example. Let's use it.
I'm saying no. Your example of
I'm
American
asking
Jewry.
you-
No. So let me explain.
I'm
Let me
asking
explain.
you, what
Right.
does that
So your
person,
your example in halacha is called a tinuk shenishba. Tinuk shenishba is a child
right?
who was captured and raised amongst the Gentiles, doesn't know any better. I'm not talking about him. The word over here in the Hebrew is poshea. Poshea is not a person who doesn't know better. Poshea is a guy who knows better, who knows exactly what he's doing. So, for example, the famous story with the Ramban, Nachmanides.
So I'm not talking about.
Hold on, but
I'm talking about the Poshet.
the example the story I'm about to tell you is a poshea.
Go ahead.
The guy who was a student of Nachmanides and Nachmanides taught something and he didn't agree with it, and he converted to Christianity, and he became a big guy, because in those days, if a Jew converts, one of the
Conversos.
one of the draws, the temptations to convert to Christianity was they give you positions of power and money. So he became like I say in Yiddish, a big macher. So what do? He summoned his former teacher, the Ramban, who was the leader of Spanish Jewry, which you're thinking big deal, but Spanish Jewry in the 1200s was a big deal. Could be, yeah. And he summoned him to see him on Yom Kippur. The Ramban had no choice; he had to go. In front of the Ramban, on Yom Kippur, he shechted a pig, he slaughtered a pig, and he cooked it, and he ate it. That's a pesheya. A guy who doesn't know better. I met a guy once.
Someone who's doing it on purpose.
No.
With ill intent.
He knows exactly what he's doing, right? And meaning he got a Jewish education. He knows the value of Torah. He's doing it.
He knows the pressure points.
Yeah, he's doing it to stick it to the. Like for example, I'll tell you a story. There was a king, a Jewish
He's
king.
still a Jew, right?
100%, yeah.
He's still a Jew.
Yeah. Well, you want me to finish the story? What happened to him? Okay, 1 second. But before I get to the story, let me because the stories pop into my head. That's it. I don't always prepare the stories. That's why I don't remember all the details. But there was a king. We're going to learn about it in the book of Kings 2. There's a king who was a tremendous wicked man. I mean, he was it Menashe? It wasn't Menashe. No, it was before him. It preceded Menashe. Not only did he put idols in the whole country, right? And huh? Unfortunately, it was more than one.
Amon. That was a king.
I don't remember. All right. And he went and he lay with his own mother.
Amon.
So his mother asked him, said, "Do you really derive pleasure from the source of which you came? Like, how are you?"
Mm-hmm.
So he says, "You think I'm doing this for pleasure? I'm doing this to spit in the face of the boss." That's posher. These guys. So, but that's a posher. Understand? The guys who know better, who got a Jewish education, know better. By the way, it says someone who's machal.
Amon? You're talking about he
I don't remember
only
which one.
ruled for 2 years.
I don't remember.
And it was because of what happened with his mother that he was. Anyways.
I'll have to look it up. But there are people in history, we think the people are, bad. I can give you examples. Anyway, so that story with Nachmanides, just to finish off the story. So he goes to his teacher Nachmanides and says, "How many sins did I just commit that the punishment is karet? Karet is when the soul is cut off." Nachmanides said 4. He said, "No, 5." And they started having a whole debate. So the Ramban gave him a look, like, "Stop mocking me." I guess he still had a little respect. Then he says, "You want to know why I walked away?" I said, "Sure, I want to know why." He said, "Because you once told me something that doesn't make any sense." I figured that doesn't make any sense. Then everything doesn't make any sense. What do you say? You said the story of every single person is in the portion of Hazinu. Hazinu is one of the shortest portions in there. It's 40 verses. It's like 2 columns. It's literally 2 columns in the Torah. He says, "What nonsense? There's been millions and billions of people before. There's gonna be. How can you say something?" Ramban said, "I stand by what I said." He said, "What's this nonsense?" Yeah, he says, "Yeah." He says, "Show me where I am." And Ramban didn't know exactly where he was, because this is something tradition. So he went to the corner, and he prayed to God. The God should help him. God helped him. He said, "You ready for this?" Right. If you open up the Chumash, right before the 4th reading, there's a verse there. It says, "Amarti afeim ashpisam enish zichram." I said about their anger, I will wipe the memory out of. I will wipe them out from the memory of man. Ashpitam enish zichram. And Ban said, if you take the 3rd letter of each word, it spells your name. Amarti, Resh, Reb. Every Jew has like Reb, like Mister. Afeim, Aleph, Pe, Aleph. Ashpita, Aleph, Shin, Bet, Vez. Be'enosh, Mem, Aleph, Nun. Zichram, Zayin, Chav, Resh. His name was Avner. Now, when the guy heard that, you ever heard of buyer's regret? He had that, you know what I always say, don't say it. You know that handle in the car? Think it, don't say it, right? He said, "Rabbi, what do I do now?" He says, "You do exactly what it says in the verse. Disappear." and the two versions. So one said he hired a boat, and he like dismissed the staff, and he just floated into oblivion, whatever it was. Yeah, but that was so even this guy, the Poshei Yisrael, how do they get their life? Because it's one thing, if you don't know, you go to the doctor for medicine. But if to go and actively reject the source of life, the guy on the ventilator to unplug the respirator, to unplug the machine, it makes sense. So let's finish off with this topic. We'll go to the 3 stars. The middle of 60 or 62 probably in your page. It says, by the parentheses, Oposhim. What about for the willful sin? And by the way, the idea is the word poshim. There are many different words for sinners in the Torah. The word is poshe, willful sinner. We're not talking about a guy who didn't know better. A willful sinner. Umoridim, and they rebel against the Torah scholars. How do they receive their spiritual nurture in life? Spiritual nurture and flow only with their desire to nurture and give life. In answer to this, so this is an idea expressed in Kabbalah. It says it's called the hind part. The hind part means, this is about, I'm on page 60. Let's say you're making a party. You were in the food business, so you'll understand this. You're making a party. Undoubtedly, just some food is going to end up in the trash, and the rats and the cockroaches are going to have. Now, obviously, you won't say that's your direct intent. It's called the hind part. So Kabbalah talks about when I want to give you something, and I want to give you because I'm a friend, I give it to you. But with kids, they're fighting over a toy. Say, give the toy to your brother. No, I said give it to him. Say fine. When you give it because you don't want it, you throw it over your shoulder. So it happens because it happens, not because it's a direct intent. Obviously, in the grand scope of things, in the world of free will, you can't have a guy's a sinner, zap. You just have rabbis walking around with tridents. Did you say you're not coming to shul?
It'd be a good Marvel
No,
movie.
what?
It'd be a good Marvel movie.
There you go, right? I'm wondering why Stanley didn't learn Tanya. That's why he didn't think about it, right?
Stanley Goldberg would have done it.
Right? Stanley was a Jew, right? I think the inventors of DC were also Jews.
They're all Jews.
Right?
They're all.
Right? I think the guys, I read it somewhere. By the way, there's a guy, totally off the subject with it. There's a guy, he wasn't religious. When he wasn't religious, he was a big a comic book aficionado or whatever it is. So he became religious, and he gives a whole class. You can Google it. Interesting how he ties in all the superheroes and who they are, biblical. It's very interesting. How authoritative it is, I don't know, but it's very interesting. And so let's finish up this paragraph. Nurture from the hind part can be understood by way of comparison. When one gives an object to his enemy, obviously not out of true desire to give, but rather due to the external forces. The grudging reluctance for which he gives will be reflected in this manner. He will turn away from him, tossing the object to his enemy over his shoulder. The same is true in the spiritual sphere. When spiritual nurture is given willingly, it is described as coming from, it's from the hind part, the giver. Nevertheless, even those who rebel against the sages receive some measure of spiritual nourishment from them. For every soul, without exception, must be bound to its root and source. So even if a Jew actively rejects its source, you're still connected to your source. A Jew can't unjew himself. Doesn't make a difference how miserable you are.
You still haven't really explained to me if a person is hostile and not a child who is kidnapped, completely familiar with what he's doing. And
Like the guy in the story of the Ramban.
Even more so because there's no Bible code that can actually get this person to snap into it.
That's not true. No such thing.
No, this person is very familiar with this kind of an approach, and still, what do you do with that kind of a Jew?
There's always a way.
What
There's
is
a,
that?
there's a verse.
Hold
There's
on,
a verse.
man,
One second. There's a
it's
verse
not
that
my
says,
question.
"Liyidach mimenu nidach." No one is pushed away. No one will be lost. There's always a way.
What do you do with him?
You keep trying.
Who's the prophet that came back with Nehemiah? Ezra allowed the Israelites to come back, but not their wives or children if they were not Jews.
Okay.
Okay, so what is that?
When Ezra came, you're mixing in things. When Ezra came from Babylonia, there was absolute chaos in the land of Israel. Stores were open on Shabbos. people
Who were married to non-Jews,
Right.
and had kids with them, as
And-
had a decision about that.
and
I'm asking
within
if there's a
within
specific
10
case
years,
that
yeah, but
I
those
mean-
guys again, but that's not willful. They don't. Talking about the missing 167 years. This is one of the biggest problems. So one of the problems with they say the prophecy was 70 years from the destruction of the first temple to the second temple. The reason why some people say it was more is because the Jews drastically changed so much in 70 years, and most of the Jews didn't want to leave Babylonia. After 70 years, I mean, how much roots can you set down in 70 years? I mean, they don't want to go back to Israel. I mean, the Jews, like in Germany, they don't want to go to Israel, fine. But they were there for hundreds of years, 6, 7, 8, 1,000 years. After 70 years, I mean, if I told you right now, let's go back to Israel, everything's going to be great, I guarantee. I mean, so it's a big problem. Yeah, but again, it doesn't make a difference how terrible the Jew has acted. We don't give up on any Jew. The question isn't if, the question is how. That's why you have different rabbis, different approaches. So, some people like me, some people don't like me. Some people like more like pulpit rabbis. Some people don't like pulpit rabbis. Everyone has their rabbi. Everyone has their person that speaks to them. It's as long as it's in the confines of Torah. You know what I'm saying? So some people like all these different experiences. No such thing. We don't give up on anybody. Listen, there was a rabbi, unfortunately passed away. He was a great man. His name was Shortsy. His name was Shorts. He was a rabbi in UCLA. I mean, this guy was like a stoner. See, but the way he interacted, he went to UCLA in the 60s, and people told him, "You're crazy. 60s, no one cares about religion." The man had so many followers, so many people loved him because he showed you could be a stoner, laid back, beach, and he would surf and everything else, and still be an observant Jew. Like maybe you go to a place like Boston where they're more. I'm giving an example, right? Of more rigid. You wouldn't work there as a, So it's.
I think I've learned how to craft my question a little better.
Okay.
What does the Tanya define those that refuse all of these approaches?
Doesn't make a difference. You're still connected.
No, not what you're supposed to do with them. Who are they? What kind of a soul is that? What is that person? What does the Tanya regards them as?
The soul.
These people that really, no matter what you're gonna do, as many times
Right.
as usual, you'll never give up on them. You're gonna keep trying. You're gonna go over your approach. You can. What about that soul?
So it could be. They come from God's supernal wisdom. Every soul. It could be they're experiencing the soul, the lowest nefesh. They're very unaware of their connection to their. By the way,
But what about all their sin? Where?
But the connection. But there's what a Jew is.
Say, Ammon.
One second.
What about Ammon?
Okay,
King
right.
of
Here.
Judah. He was as sinful as can
Right.
be.
Right.
Who is that guy?
Again, so there's what a Jew is and what a Jew does. What the Jew does doesn't affect who you are. It affects you in your relation, your connection, your conscious connection to Hashem. But you can't change what you are. You can't change where you come from.
King David changed for a whole group of people. He said, "You're no longer Jews," and that was that.
But they were never Jews. They were never Jews.
were Jews.
They were not Jews. There was a whole question of they converted under false pretenses. There was always a question if they were Jews. These were guys who converted. They were Canaanites. They
were a part of Am Yisrael, and then David said, "You're out." And
But he said you're out
they were out.
retroactively. They were never Jews. Same thing. Ezra did the same thing. Ezra did the same thing to Samaritans. When he came back for the second temple, and they said, "We're the real Jews." Ezra said, "You're the real Jews? Get out of here, the real Jews."
Well, no.
So I might as well curse it, and we're bleeping the whole thing out. Class
they
anyway.
What they said was that they wanted to help build the temple.
Could you imagine how I speak after another beer?
What they said is that they wanted to help rebuild the temple.
No, they said we're the real Jews.
Listen, that is a quote. I'm talking about like on a whole. The
Yeah.
argument is that they wanted to be involved, and he didn't let them. He said it was like that was.
But why? Because
Also
they weren't
because
Jews.
they weren't Jews.
No, because
also because they weren't Jews.
Because according to halacha, this is going into a whole side of thing. side thing. If a Gentile wants to donate to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, is he allowed?
If what?
If a Gentile wants to donate to the temple in Jerusalem, obviously we don't have a temple now. It's not practical.
Kings would donate, like provide sacrifice,
but not a sacrifice. A sacrifice is not a donation.
Oh, it's not.
No. So a donation to the building,
No, you
the
can't.
building or the upkeep.
Of course not.
There's certain things that we accept donations, and certain things we don't.
I'm
Because
not-
it's a temple for the Jewish people, by the Jewish people, means for actually all humanity, but only the Jewish people build it. So that's why if you're not Jewish, you can't donate.
But in today's world,
Yeah.
you have your shul.
Yeah.
Would you accept a Gentile's donation?
We accept money from everybody.
Yeah, this-
We take American Express, Visa, even Discover,
My bad.
diners,
He's got a crypto wallet.
diners. Scan this code, right? Right. Please, there are people in Pembroke Pines suffering just for a cup of coffee. So the answer is that's specifically about the Beis Hamikdash. That's not. Maimonides writes. This is very interesting chapter in Maimonides, right? There's also something to take into account. There's halachically right. There's also, it's called Darchei Shalom, the way of peace. Sometimes you can be 100% right, legally, but you go against the whole idea of the Torah. The idea of the Torah is Darchei Noam, to promote peace, humanity, and ethics, and loving kindness, and all that in humanity. I know I sound very like St. Jude, but we invented that idea first. They ripped it off. I invite you to watch that speech by Manuel Shachat, Alav Shalom. He talks about the Jews should be for Judaism, Christians for Christianity. So one guy gets up and says, if Jews don't study Christianity, where are you going to know to love your fellow as yourself? It's like, well, we have Leviticus. Well, I don't need you, right? Leviticus chapter 25, or that's 15. Right? What do I need you for? So sometimes the Maimonides says, for the sake of peace, and one of the worst mitzvot is Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem means desecration of God's name. You could be a law-abiding citizen, but if you're not interpreted but perceived by other people as a piece of garbage, then all your observance is worth zero. Nachmanides coined one of my favorite phrases ever. I'll say it in Hebrew, and then we'll translate. It says, "A menuval min haTorah." Menuval means a degenerate. You're a law-abiding degenerate. You haven't broken any laws, but you're a piece of garbage. So that's the idea. So sometimes, right? In our case, there's nothing wrong with a Gentile donating to a synagogue. That law by Maimonides says is specifically about the Bet HaMikdash, and so that's that. But to answer your question, it's very, very important. We don't write off any Jew, even no matter how miserable he is.
That wasn't my question.
No, I'm saying, and they're still connected.
What are the Jews that have written themselves off?
What's the
How
difference?
are they in categories? Are they that like a law-abiding scumbag that you
No,
just
they're not law-abiding. They don't keep Shabbat kosher. They're not law-abiding. No,
Well, okay, but
a Jew.
Are-
So it means the connection that a Jew has to Hashem is not based on what you do. So let's say, for example, you're born a Rothschild, and you could be a drug addict and this and that, but if something happens, Baron Rothschild dies, you're getting your bills, just because that's the virtue of your name. You're born a Jew, you have this connection to Hashem, whether or not for the good and for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not bad, but even a person could. By the way, let me give you an example. I know we're getting late. You can say 1 + 1 is 3. You can say a bunch of crazy things. You can say the world is flat. You can say whatever you want. What you're saying doesn't change reality. A person can do whatever they want their entire life. They can marry whoever they want, eat what they want, and not fasting. You fill in the blank with whichever terrible thing, and they can speak bad and make problems for Israel. Some of the worst problems for Israel has come for Jews. Historically, the worst problem for Jews have come from Jews. Yeah, I'm saying if you read the disputation of Nachmanides.
So the Ramban, when he walked away from that guy, because he was like everything you're saying is wasting time.
He didn't walk away.
The guy walked away.
When the guy walked away, And
Yeah.
Or
what-
voted away.
No, and then
Well, later he floated,
and then
yeah.
the Ramban told him to float away. or to
No,
go
he told him. He said. He
What do I
said
do now?
the Ramban said. He didn't tell him exactly what to do. He said, "You have
Is
to."
that what I should take? Is that sort of the lesson I should take away?
No.
When I approach somebody
No.
that's like that, I should also tell them to just float away.
No, because that's his story for that person. No, your job is to bring everyone closer to Judaism.
What about that person? What if I run into that person again?
Or who were Bavner?
Ah,
By the way, the Rebbe said, interesting.
What if he floats back and I run into him?
Hey, save me! Is your name Avner? Bang! He's supposed to be dead by now. No, the idea. By the way, the Rebbe, by the way, points out.
Invite him to Thursday midnight.
The Rebbe, by the way, the Rebbe points out something very powerful, very, very powerful. The acronym in the verse is not Avner; it's Reb Avner. That even though the guy was eating chazer on Yom Kippur and everything else, embedded in the verse is still Reb Avner. He's still Mr. Jew Avner.
Who's
Who's
one advice in life was to go float away.
him. But yeah, that's a special story because the Ramban got special answer. Our job is to bring every Yid closer, every Jew closer to Torah.
Is there ever a point where you're like, you know what, you're on your own. Go figure it out on your own. I'm not here to help you anymore. I'm like, you've crossed the line of me having to help you.
He's saying, do we?
Like, I hope you find your way back, but it's not going to be through my education. Or do I have to help you because you're Jewish? And no matter what,
What do you
I have to help
mean? What do you mean helping?
Is there a point where I'm entitled to be like, no, like, good luck? Like, you.
I mean, I think
You're not. I don't think you're entitled for that.
I
No,
think-
no, it's just like whatever whatever your life path
I
is.
think
hope
you can
come back to Judaism.
I think you
but
can ask the
you've
question more
crossed
broadly. What if
the-
a person asks you to put you in a situation where it's not healthy, conducive for yourself? So, for example, the Rebbe said that we should go put on tefillin and visit people. What if the guy owns a store? And when you're younger in yeshiva, a teenager, you go from store to store. Anything owned by a Jew, right? You go put on tefillin with him. It's short. Every Friday we would do that. What if a guy owns a store, a not kosher store? Let's say he owns a store that sells things that a nice young Jewish boy shouldn't see. You say, oh well, a Jew is a Jew, right? I wish that was the case. No, but just kidding. But the idea that sometimes you can't put yourself in that situation. You're not allowed to put yourself in a situation to fail. Sometimes you need to call in the big guns. But there were stories where guys asked the rabbi a question, like at the Rebbe's shluchim somewhere. He said, "Listen, you're asking great questions. Go ask the Rebbe." Certain questions, even we find this in the book of Exodus, part of Jethro. Jethro says there's certain questions that junior rabbis can answer, and certain questions you need Moses to answer. Yeah, it's, by the way, certain things like Eli Wiesel, by the way. Eli Wiesel, I think the lights are going to turn off in 5 minutes. But Eli Wiesel, after the Holocaust, Eli Wiesel was a religious person. And he came from the Hasidic group Vishnitz. But his father died right before the... Ever read his book, Night? It's very good. Very, very good. It's a very short book, but a very good book. Very powerful book.
Only takes one night.
No, unfortunately, it's
What was that other joke he said?
Right.
Another thing.
But I was talking to my sister last night. I had a whole night of dark humor, but not on thing, because people are going to think negatively. We'll get in a second.
Back to time shift.
Yeah, back to time shares. So after the Holocaust, he had all these questions, and no one can sufficiently answer. I mean, the questions he had were heavy questions, and he met the Rebbe. I mean, the Rebbe was a great man. The Rebbe was the Reish B'nai Yisrael, was the head of the Jewish people. He was the example, and he. I mean, the whole long thing. But he got there. He convinced Eli Wiesel to get married, to have a kid, and he told him, "This is your biggest revenge against Hitler." In the story he sent out with the soldier who lost his hand. So, you're right. Certain things need,
Trumpeldor?
Uh-huh.
The soldier that lost his hand?
Yeah, I posted.
No.
You're not in the community chat.
It's one of the WhatsApp groups. No, not true.
Trumpeldor.
No, it's more recent.
Yeah, it was in the Yom Kippur War. So you're right. But our objective has to be, our view of every Jew has to be that he's holiness. Inside is holiness. And by the way, every person has godliness inside of him.
Yes.
That's why we don't go around saying Jew or Gentile. One less. No, obviously we don't do that. Every person has godliness. But again, we said in the beginning when we started learning this book is geared towards Jews. I'm not saying, but every single Yid, every single Jew has godliness inside of him, and sometimes they don't know it themselves. So our job when you meet another Yid is to try to get them to realize that if a person knows that no matter what he does, he's always connected, it's a lot easier. But if you feel, I'm always being measured and based on what I do, God is gonna kick me in, it's a lot more tense. Okay, and next week we'll finish off on we'll finish off chapter 2. We'll go into chapter 3 next week. It got late, but we should have finished up chapter 2.
To your question, I think that maybe we're committed to
Still
try to connect them